when I was talking earlier about those 3 buckets, so in the old days, the despondent kid and the traumatized kid, they created the critical mass. They were the majority of kids who were locked up at juvenile hall or probation camp. And then you always had mentally ill kids, but they were so absorbed into the critical mass of those other kids. Now, and it's probably a good thing, because they would say we're trying to keep them in the community. So I started with 25 different detention facilities. Now I think there are 5, maybe. Wow. Of course, all the youth authority, those are all closed down.
Yeah.
The majority of the camps are closed down. And now, they have ostensibly 1 juvenile hall. So, but in the early days, it was 25. So, if a kid on probation didn't go to school,
right,
he's going to camp or he's doing Ricardo M time.
Right,
Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
And so, but now you only have mentally ill kids, truly. And it's just dramatic because I go into say mass and I brace myself because it's, truthfully, it's like cuckoo's nest. I mean, you go in and kids are talking to themselves or they don't even know what this is. And I mean, it's really, they need a lot of help.
Right.
And, they're there. And so maybe it's going to keep them from hurting somebody or hurting themselves. But, it's
hard. Yeah.
It's really, they really need mental health,
right,
help. But that's way different than from
how it was back when we were in juvenile, when we were locked up. Yeah. And that just puts another layer of.
Yeah. I mean, so now Campus Kilpatrick.
Yeah.
Which is a brand new facility. There are only 20 kids there.
Wow.
And Malibu, where it's located, has said you cannot exceed 20 kids. The city of Malibu.
Right, city of Malibu.
Yeah. So it's a facility for, I don't know, 100.
A couple hundred, yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's that many.
Right.
It might be 100.
Yeah.
And they can't exceed 20. I mean, it's just...
Right.
And I went there to say mass, and I went, whoa.
Yeah.
And these are all kids' serious crimes. And again, who commits serious crimes? Kids who are really have issues.
Right. What was it, like maybe the fentanyl?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, part of the thing was in the early days, gang members would sell crack or PCP, but they pretty much were disciplined by each other if they used it.
Right.
And so that was, and homies would tell me, God, I was smoking a Sherm, and please don't tell my homies. Because they would be beat down, and then there were other gangs, that would sell PCP and others that, just
smoked
used it
yeah.
and they just did it. And then there were other gangs that strict prohibition.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want anybody to get out of control,
right,
start beefs with,
neighborhoods
who were friendly with them.
Yeah.
And then it kind of started to change. I mean, homies were always selling crack at, once crack became the thing.
Right.
Running up to cars and double up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, the homies kind of became their own best customers, kind of.
Yeah.
People started to, that broke down the discipline thing. And now here's where we are now, I mean,
in the fentanyl
crisis. Fentanyl is just, again, I've buried more, it's gang-related deaths. There's, there was COVID for a time also.
Yeah.
COVID deaths.
No, yeah.
And then there was always, there have been for the last couple of years, lots of fentanyl deaths.
Yeah.
Even when it began in the early days, when you first started to have fentanyl deaths, nobody really knew, it was
exactly.
Like even guys in prison would die and then they'd come out and it's like, what were they doing? All of a sudden he just dropped dead.
Right.
There was not a sense of that we really knew. Now we kind of know.
Right. Now they're handing out Narcan, right? Like, before that you couldn't find that, right?
Yeah. Although they're giving Narcan to individuals. I don't know.
Exactly.
How do you self-administer it?
we've had to do it here.
We've had to do it here.
We've all learned. Like,
but how would you do it to yourself? I mean, if you know what I mean.
I think
it's like the nose shot, right?
It's the nose shot. But one of the things.
But if you're down, if you're already,
is that what you're saying is like we had to learn rapidly because it was like it came, we heard about it, and then it just hit the community so hard. Like you said, Pops, is people were falling out.
Yeah.
And then even here, like there was homies that would leave here, and next thing you know, down the street they're falling out.
They're out.
The interesting thing is too, I think, like going back to what you were saying, as we used to discipline ourselves, and then addiction got progressively worse. I do believe because of trauma and us like not really having access at that time to resources like therapy, mental health services, we begin to self-medicate.
Yeah. The pain is too. The pain is
It gets so hard, and then it became a part of the norm, became a part of the culture to get high. Even music, like you know, you think about like some of the songs,
soundtracks of
addiction, like soundtracks of addiction. But we had to learn so fast how to use this shit. I remember saying to myself, like, Jose, you need to learn how to use this shit.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to administer it because it happened fast. Homies were
and it's happening right now, right?
It's happening now. Homies were opening up a little bag of whatever they thought was carga or whatever.
Yeah.
And because there was fentanyl in it, and they smelled it, they were falling out dead, homie. So that's just how strong it was. It was just interesting.
Yeah, we've had to use it here.
I've used it 4 times myself here on Homies.
Yeah.
For you, was there anything in your experience, in your own background, that allowed you to see, like when you went to Dolores Mission, that allowed you to see these people as people? Like, what's the seed of your compassion versus like you're talking about these other priests who saw these, who demonized? Like that was the easy way. Like, was there anything in your experiences, in your own personal story, that allowed you to see beyond just the sort of
that's a good question. I don't know exactly. I mean, again, I always say I won the lottery in terms of parents and family and zip code, you know. So I clearly privileged, you know. But that doesn't account for anything. But I don't know. I mean, I think Bolivia was so pivotal because, and that was the poorest country in the hemisphere at the time. It was poorer than Haiti. And it was just kind of astounding how extraordinary the people were, you know.
And the indigenous people right there, right? Yeah. Who was it? The Quechua. Yeah.
And so that was, you know, there was just this, the nobility was in the air that you breathed down there. And so, I don't know, it kind of rewired me a little bit. So when I came here, you know, I felt the same way about the señoras. Again, it's only women with children. That was the profile of the projects. There were hardly any men around. Women with children, with sons and daughters. But so I found them just so fun and extraordinary and wise and brave, and the courage of their tenderness. So it was easy. It was kind of transition from Bolivia to first meeting the mothers, and then you started to bury their sons, you know, and then it was easy because they, you know, and in my early days, I would shake my fist a lot, you know. If I gave talks, I was pissed all the time because it was like one life in Westwood was worth 8 lives in Boyle Heights, which literally happened when this graphic artist, a woman who was on a date in Westwood, which is near UCLA, where, you know, 2 cars shooting at each other, and she was killed. And oh my God, they took police officers from other places, and assigned them to Westwood, you know, of all places. I mean, because it was just a fluky thing, really. And then, you know, they had detectives pulled from, you know, here on the east side to investigate that case. And a reward was offered for information that would lead to information.
And that same day.
And yet, you know, I had just buried 8 kids in a 3-week period, and nobody was offering rewards or, you know, assigning more. So it was clear that, you know, that people thought one life in Westwood was worth more than 8.
Right.
So anytime I gave a talk, I look back on it and I'm, kind of mildly embarrassed by it. But I was enraged.
Yeah.
That was kind of my mode. And that's why when I can say I've buried 257 people, it's because I started to count because they didn't count. They didn't matter. So I thought, well, I'm going to count. And I'm going to say, yeah, I've buried 13. And I've buried 125. And I've buried 267.
Right. And does that part ever get, like, overwhelming? Like, just having to bury so many?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's 88 to 98 was the decade of death. So that number has really decreased considerably.
Right.
Now it's starting to, somebody asked me, why is it starting? And part of it is there's no collective memory like we had. So right after the decade of death, you had young people saying, I don't want any part of that. They remember it. They remember elementary school. They remember ducking behind the dumpster. They remember shooting day, morning, noon, and night. Now, there's no memory. So you have these homies who are getting into neighborhoods. I even watch it in Dolores Mission. And there's a kind of they don't remember.
Right.
And so they get into, I don't know how they think to do it, but they get into a neighborhood and you can't
undo it.
Well, you can't remind them what it was like because they don't remember.
They
don't remember.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll never be as bad as that period was.
Right.
When was the first time you got locked up? How old?
13,
what year was it?
13. That was like 90, 99? 90. No, like, like around that.
Yeah.
Like 97.
So that was, we're sort of getting to the tail end. But it's interesting, in 99, October of 99 was when our bakery burned to the ground.
Yeah.
And I still think that's a kind of a pivotal moment in the city because the LA Times, in the wake of the fire said, hey, this doesn't belong to Father Greg Boyle. This belongs to the city. This belongs to Los Angeles. So it just overnight, it just switched. And that's why we're in this building.
Yeah.
Because that generated all sorts of goodwill. So we could buy this property and then ultimately build this headquarters.
Right.
And it was all right then, Now, again, we moved in 2008. But so it took, 8 years. But it began with that moment, where suddenly we were hoisted up on the shoulders of the city. And, after the fire.
Right.